Hi everyone, I'm Casey Martin from Wine Country Woodworks, and this is going to be a really cool video. So I got East Coast Resin, Art and Glow Resin, and Easy Cast Resin all off of Amazon that are all prime shipping, and they're all really cheap. So I thought this would be a fun video for those of you who follow my channel and have seen my recent videos. I've been planning this for a while. I wanted to buy some of the cheapest epoxy resins off of Amazon and see if they could work for anything. I specifically wanted to see if I could turn them into pens, or in this case bottle openers on the lathe. Basically just turn them into anything on the lathe. Now a lot of this resin, especially Art and Glow, for example, as the name implies, is really used for art. It's not really typically used to be turned into anything, and I wanted to do that. So my kind of thinking behind this all was I was going to kind of have two different ways of doing each resin. The plan was, for those of you who follow me and know my resin casting experience, I typically only use Alumilite resin, which needs pressure, and so I use pressure to eliminate any bubbles and make it crystal clear. So for this resin, or these three resins, I wanted to have one batch in pressure and one batch in non-pressure, because all three of these resins are supposedly okay to use without pressure, meaning they'll cure without bubbles. And in my case, as you guys will see later, that didn't really work out too well for the ones without pressure. So these three resins all are measured by volume, not by weight, which Alumilite that I use all the time is by weight. I figured I might as well use all of the resin in each kit. I'm not going to use it for anything else, so I just poured each of the bottles in completely, mixed it up. Pretty easy, or would be pretty hard to mess something up that easy. So I mix it. It's just like any other resin or Alumilite, for those who are familiar with it, where you mix until it becomes clear. There's no more cloudiness, no more striations, basically like strings or lines of unmixed resin when you stir it. And so I did that for a while, as you guys are seeing now. So I definitely wanted to do three different colors for all of them. For this particular one, I end up choosing Paradise Blue from Caster's Choice, and I wanted to also mention that all the links for everything, Paradise Blue is the next one, I believe. This one I just used White Pearl, but also from Caster's Choice. All of the links to, of course, these epoxies, the Caster's Choice mica powders I use, the HDPE mold material you're seeing right there, everything that I use, links will be down in the description. I even have a page that I've mentioned a couple times, but for those who haven't heard it, I have a page on my website as well with links to all the stuff I regularly use to help everybody out. So now I'm moving on to the East Coast Resin. Same kind of general approach of just dumping each bottle in there. All three of these epoxies, in terms of mixability or viscosity, are all very similar. They're all really thick. They all take quite a bit of effort to stir. If you aren't using pressure, then you definitely don't want to be stirring as vigorously or as aggressively as I do with all three of these. Now, even though I knew that I was going to be having a batch of each not use pressure, I didn't really want to deal with taking a ton of time to mix it and be super careful just for the piece that wasn't going to be under pressure, because I also wanted to see how well it worked. If I did stir very vigorously, in theory, that really shouldn't matter. So the way that I kind of differentiated some in pressure and non-pressure, for the East Coast Resin and the Art and Glow, the first two that I do, there's enough in the kit for me to have a full mold of 5 pen blanks, and then also 1 pen blank in the silicone mold that you'll see right there. For this one, I end up using the Paradise Blue that I accidentally made a mistake earlier thinking it was the first resin, and Then later, that you guys will see with the Easy Craft, it ends up being not enough resin to fit a full mold. So I end up showing you guys later what I end up doing with a different silicone mold. As I mentioned, this stuff is pretty thick. You can see me trying to make sure I get as much as I can to make sure that the volume was perfect, and I really couldn't get anything else out, so I ended up just not using all of the other half. So I just added in the Paradise Blue and the white mica powder you saw me do a couple seconds ago, and I've been loving this Paradise Blue. Here's an up close of me pouring it into the mold. I think it looks beautiful. I think it looks almost kind of like a tropical blue. I think that's what it's meant to be since it's called Paradise Blue, but I really like it. It's been fun messing with the Paradise Blue and then their normal more blue. I forget what it's called, if it's called Brilliant Blue or what exactly. But it's pretty cool using the two at the same time as well. So now it was time to do the Easy Craft, I believe, and you can go back and either look at the links that I put down for the 3 or just look at the beginning of the video for the exact ounce sizes. But I believe that the first 2 kits are 16 ounce kits, and then the Easy Craft is 8 ounce. And considering they were all pretty similar in price, I don't know why you would go with the 8 ounce, but I wanted to try it nonetheless. So I end up using this other single blank silicone mold for the majority of them, the ones that are going to go in pressure, and then I just use the other silicone mold that's going to sit out without pressure. On this one I added a couple pieces of glitter, and I believe I actually did the same thing with the blue and the white that I forgot to mention earlier, and it ends up looking really cool once it's turned. So the only other downside about using pressure for these is that it takes 24 hours to fully cure. So what's interesting right now is this guy came out really easy from the silicone mold from the first resin we used. These came out really easy from this mold, and it's the same resin as this red, and the blue I haven't had to try to take out of that yet. But these guys do not want to come out. It's actually like kind of pulling the resin apart from itself, which is really bad. Like I might have just ruined this mold a little bit with that tear. So I'll keep trying to get these out. I should be able to get them out, but maybe at the expense of my mold, unfortunately. And you shouldn't really have to use mold release with silicone. Nothing should really stick to it. So we'll get these guys out and let you know how it goes. So yeah, this resin completely just ruined my silicone mold. At this point, this is the only untouched single pen blank single pen blank cavity that I can keep using. And this guy stuck so hard. This one stuck pretty bad too, and it was definitely going to ruin this guy. But because of the tearing here and this guy sticking like unbelievably to the bottom and to the sides, like I can get this out, but I'm not even gonna probably bother at trying that one at this point. Clearly the non-pressure does not work for these two. I don't know if it's because there was small bubbles that grabbed on, if it had to do with heat. I'm not sure. I know pressure doesn't really change anything about heat. These guys came out of this mold fine. It's the same type of silicone as this. And this mold works great. There's nothing wrong with it. So it's pretty frustrating, honestly. But at the end of the day, at least I'm the one testing it for everyone. So you guys kind of just saw my live reaction or my experience of taking them out of the silicone molds, which was pretty frustrating. But fortunately, the other two pieces came out of the HEPE molds effortlessly. They actually came out without a problem. I would say just as easy as Alumilite does. So there's really no issue with the HEPE molds as far as I can tell. For those of you who haven't seen my resin dust collection video, I highly suggest going and checking that out. The overarm dust collection I got works fantastically. And here are the blanks as they came out. That was the blue, and now here's the white. They look fantastic coming out. These are the ones that had pressure. And here is an example of the one that wasn't under pressure, that came out fine. There's bubbles everywhere. There's bubbles all on the sides, and you can see it really easily in person. Hopefully you guys can kind of see on the sides. But I figured, since the other two non-pressure ones gave me so much trouble with the silicone, and that one had a ton of bubbles, I just wasn't even going to bother with turning it. It might have turned okay. It also might have exploded because it might have had just no structural integrity. I don't know. I didn't really want to risk it. I do think that you might be able to get no bubbles if you used vacuum, which would be kind of silly to use, and then you might run the risk of it causing a problem with making it boil. I've heard that before with some epoxies, so you'd want to make sure. And then you could also just be super diligent about mixing slowly, and then also making sure if you use like a heat gun or something. So enough on that. Now to the turning. I just finished turning the blue one, which so far getting it round wasn't a problem. I think all the problems with these that you'll end up seeing, because there was a lot of them turning, originated from me removing the tailstock. When they were supported fine with the tailstock, they turned just fine. They didn't turn as nice as Alumilite. They weren't as strong. They were definitely a little more brittle, but they turned okay. When they were supported well, and especially once they were round, they were fine. I'll give them that. They weren't that bad. However, since they're not very strong, I ran into a ton of problems later on that you guys will see when I wasn't supporting it with this tailstock. Now, since for the purpose of these, they weren't actually going to be bottle openers, they were really just to get them on the lathe and turn them without having to drill them through so we could see the transparency well, I probably should have just kept the tailstock on the whole time for the sanding and the finishing process. But I'm glad I didn't, because I was able to end up seeing a lot of the problems with this resin that we later on find out, and actually how kind of honestly dangerous it is. And you guys will see later on what I mean by that. But in all fairness, in terms of the turning, see right here you can see as soon as I take off the tailstock, I really quickly want to mention, in all fairness, all three of them did turn very similarly in terms of turning. Now this white one, which is the Art and Glow one, had a lot of problems. So as you could see right there, as soon as I took it off of the tailstock, I think all of these have a problem with heat and that they're not strong. And so with that one, what happened with the heat, where the thread was glued in, it got loose and just came off the thread. So I had to take that off and re-glue it back in. And while that was gluing back in, I started sanding the blue one, which is the East Coast resin. Now, I think out of all of them, the East Coast resin was probably one of the better ones. See, I start to have a problem as well here too, though, with it starting to get hot. I wanted to sand where the threaded insert was because my turning tool didn't get to it as well, but that's where all the problems start with the heat. The red, which is the Easy Cast, also did an alright job, especially for being one of the thinnest, because my drill bit kind of drilled crooked, and that's why I had to turn it so thin on one end to get it round. However, they all have the same problems. They're so weak that when they have no tailstock support, they just get completely out of round. And so I'm sanding them all up to about 600, which is what I would normally sand. And this one is the big problem. So I'm sanding a lot on the end to kind of get rid of the glue where the the threaded insert got glued in. And here, coming up really soon, was my first experience with the dangerous nature of using these resins. So I'm thinking it's okay, and right at this moment, I slowed it down a lot. Right at this moment, you can see my hands come off, and I try to stop the lathe as fast as possible, and that was in real time, and it ended up shooting at me, which ended up being fine. It actually didn't hurt at all. It was surprisingly soft, but still, nonetheless, you definitely don't want something breaking off the lathe like that, which had to do with the resin not being that strong, and also I think having a problem with heat. Here is another big mess up that I guess could have been mitigated by me by not trying to put the towel around it to get kind of a full grip on it. However, I've done that plenty of times with Alumilite and wood and other things, and what happened was the resin got so hot that it stuck to the towel. It was really hard to pick up on camera, so I didn't show, but I ended up seeing a part that was stuck to it, and then I hit them all up on the buffing wheel, even the white one that ended up breaking off, and in their defense, they do look great. I've always thought that you could take any resin, even if it's not meant to be turning or meant to be turned, and turn it into something beautiful. However, it's not meant for that. If you guys may be able to see, I already passed it, but there's a spot on the bottom of the blue where it ended up getting stuck right there. If you could see it, it's hard to see not on the camera, or it's hard to see on the camera, but a lot easier to see in person. So the white was the Art and Glow, the blue was the East Coast resin, and here's the red that's the Easy Cast. I think the red turned out the best, which is unfortunate because the red was probably the least amount of resin for around the same amount of price. However, I don't recommend any of these. I think it was a fun experiment for me. They turned out okay visually, but they would suck as a bottle opener. I mean, they wouldn't be strong at all. You'd probably snap it in half trying to open your first bottle. Anyway, thank you guys so much for sticking to the end. I hope you guys enjoyed me being the guinea pig for these resins. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please comment down below your thoughts, any comments at all. I always reply to them as best as I can. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.